Hi, I just want to give you a quick tutorial on how to maximize your usage of your Inutrition Pro account. So by now you would have received an email prompting you to sign in and set up your own account. And this will land you on this page. Now you probably don't need to pay too much attention to this. This is more for what's happening in the database itself. Sign in. Sign in. And for the purposes of this exercise, I've set up private account for myself as if I was a client. So this would be what I would see and what you will see. So you go to my plans. Now in your first week, and this is an important week because it really lets us to set some baseline calories and macronutrients and see how your body is responding. And this is what allows us to further individualize it as we go forward. So it's not just about setting things up in the beginning, it's about what we do from here on in. Now, quite typically, I'll set you up with two templates, which will be, according to your questionnaires, will allow me to generate a training day and a non-training day. And just in the examples that I'm using here, it's once a day training, it's 5 meals in the afternoon, and this is a low carb plan, and we have a resting day as well. Now, it could be that I've set 3 or more plans up for you to start off with, depending on what you're actually doing and depending on how your lifestyle is. There could be less meals, but this again will all be quite personal. My purpose here is largely to show you how you can manipulate the plans so that they're useful to you and you can make them personal. Now, what you'll generally see if you press on the eye icon is something like this. Now this is using me as an example, but once I go through it, you'll see how I'm able to change these. And this gives me now access to literally thousands of different meal plans according to my particular goals and needs. Now LBM stands for lean body mass, and I'm set at 60 kilograms. And this is essentially what happens if all the body fat is removed. I'm setting my calories at a 20% deficit, which is quite modest, and this is 20% less than my total daily energy expenditure, which is what it would take to sustain my weight. I'm setting my activity level here. I don't have a particularly manual job apart from my own training, and my protein goal is 3.2 grams per lean body mass, and this gives me a total of 1,866 calories. I'm breaking it up in 5 meals in this example, and then we see in our macronutrients I have 204 grams of protein to consume, 69 grams of fat, close enough to 70, and 106 grams of carbohydrates. So even though it's a lower carbohydrate diet, it's not necessarily incredibly low. See, there's still 22% of my total calories. It's predominantly a higher protein plan. Now, as we progress, these figures could change depending on my training load and depending on how quickly I'm progressing or other factors that may come in. Now, in this plan, you'll see that I've broken the calories up evenly over 5 meals. It could be in your plan that you have some meals which are higher and some which are lower, but I generally like a pretty even spread. So you'll see 373 calories, and here I'm having higher protein fat meals in the early part of the day and higher protein carbohydrates later. And the reasoning behind this example is because this should favor fat usage during the day, at least for my lifestyle. After I train, I want to get some carbohydrates to replenish muscle glycogen and help with recovery. So what I really want to look at here is how you can modify these. So in yours, I'll have set up some meal options which you might see and think, well, is that what I'm supposed to eat? Well, these are just things that I think are possibly favorable. You are highly encouraged to actually now personalize these, and you can potentially have whatever you want, providing they hit these numbers to the right. So even though I'm looking at 38.4 grams of protein, this is actually equivalent in kangaroo loin fillet to 116 grams, 0.1. Probably worth mentioning, those 0.1s, no one's ever hitting that with any degree of specificity that closely consistently. Try and get as close as you can. There is a big difference, however, between 150 grams and 120. So you probably want to try and get it within a couple of grams in most cases. With things like macadamia nut oils, with the oils, it's probably worth remembering that 1 teaspoon is the equivalent of 5 grams. All solid fats are easier to measure anyway. So I like red meat in this meal largely because it does help to raise dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter responsible for energy and focus. And that's largely because of the high amount of the amino acid L-tyrosine in most red meats. But for the purposes of this exercise, let's imagine that I actually am not a big fan of red meat in the morning and I want something a little bit more typical. So I'm thinking I would prefer maybe some eggs and salmon and mushrooms, possibly cooked in some grass-fed butter. So how I would do that is I would scroll through here and you'll see there's quite an exhaustive amount of food choices here, and I would find whole eggs. Now you'll notice straight away that whole eggs on them by themselves, to get that amount of protein, will shoot us over the fat component, and that's because there is a certain amount of fat in whole eggs. You can actually add egg whites to this, but here I'm going to use salmon. So to add another food option, you press this plus sign and that splits your macronutrient, and here I'm able to go scroll down and I'm going to find smoked salmon in seafood. I'm going to have it cooked, previously cooked. There's an uncooked option there, and at the moment this is like 50% equal. You can manipulate these up and down if you want more of them, but now you know that you're looking at around slightly over 95 grams of each of those. I'm going to select grass-fed butter. It only says butter here, but preferentially I would suggest using grass-fed butter. And as much as I like asparagus, I'm going to bring mushrooms into this option. So you can also split these equally and add more options if you like, or you can reduce them. And you'll see in the next option down that I've already done that. And here I'm looking at a quick meal, which is whey protein isolate, which is supplemental whey. These are usually quite low in fats and carbohydrates. So that would probably be a slightly larger scoop of that. I'm using some supplemental fish oil, some almonds, and I'm also going to have some strawberries. It's worth mentioning that strawberries, well, all berries are very low in carbohydrates, so these make great accompaniments to all the meals earlier in the day. If I was to swap that to something like banana, you'll notice if I'm to try and get 5.5 grams of carbohydrates, that banana reduces that to 22. So 5.5, 22. So it makes more sense to me to go with strawberries, and I like strawberries. So just before like I said, these first 3 meals are predominantly protein and fat. I just want to touch quickly on the vegetables in this meal, and then I want to show you how to manipulate this type of meal. And if you notice here, I've got mixed vegetables. So just quickly with protein, it's worth noting that chicken breast we have here, but later on you'll also see uncooked. So there is a difference between cooked and uncooked measurements, largely because so if you look at these, you see that we have like access to like raw, like bacon raw, lean bacon raw, and cooked. And the reason being is that the cooking will actually remove some moisture, so you'll get a different weight. Coconut oil, mixed vegetables. I want to touch briefly, and I put this in your nutrition guide, which will be a PDF document that you should have about free foods, and I encourage you to use these. So my overriding rule with high nutrient, low calorie, low carbohydrate vegetables, basically mixed vegetables, majority of these, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, green fibrous things. I count these as free foods. The reality being, if you ever try and get 100 grams of carbohydrate from broccoli, you're going to be looking at over a kilo of broccoli. And the fiber content in it largely offsets a lot of that anyway. So my feeling with this is make sure you're weighing all your proteins, you're measuring your fats, and you're weighing and measuring all carbs in terms of the higher energy carbohydrates and fruits, but vegetables you can have wherever you like. So in this case, 5.5 grams of mixed vegetables, and we're looking at green mixed vegetables here, is over 200. I would just have as much as I want of those rather than counting them. The only time I generally don't have them is in this post-workout meal here, and that's not because they're necessarily bad. It's just because the fiber content will slow absorption of carbohydrate. So moving to this meal, this is something I quite like. EAA stands for essential amino acids, which is a supplemental form of amino acids, which like BCAAs, which are branched chain amino acids. Protein it consists of and is broken down into amino acids in your body. Supplemental forms are ways that you can access this very quickly, and so it's quite useful post-training. This meal, I'm not actually having any fat just because there's such a small amount anyway. It kind of seems a little bit redundant. But you'll notice I've also got some white rice in this meal, so I'm looking more at getting some carbohydrates that I'm quite interested in, and some mango. And the purpose of carbohydrates in this meal is to replenish muscle glycogen. But really, I just want to show you how you can alter these. So for argument's sake, I want something that's a little bit tastier than that. I might look at something like Chobani plain yogurt, which gives me quite a lot. I'm not sure I want that much. We can look at doing that, but we could potentially make this a bit of a fruit salad if we wanted. So we could look at some blueberries, and I think I might look at something like pineapple. And so we see these ratios here, and that will give us the right amount of protein and carbohydrates, and we're looking at really minimal sorts of fat in this meal anyway. If you do well on dairy, that might be something that you want to look at. It's completely your choice. There's also other whole foods that you could look at, but you just need to be quite mindful in a meal like that where the fat content is quite low. We're not going to overshoot it. So moving to the last meal, and this in my plan has some more carbohydrate. Again, the instruction here is towards white meat, whereas red meat will help raise dopamine. White meat helps raise serotonin, largely due to the large amounts of the amino acid L-tryptophan, and this will have a sedating effect, which is quite handy later on in the day. So let's look at something instead and go with my advice, like turkey. So we have turkey breast. We're going to only have a small amount of olive oil, seeing as I've only got 1.7 grams. And I quite like baked sweet potato. But possibly you might want to add some green veggies to that. I think it's quite redundant to measure it, even though Inutrition will give you measurements for all of those things. It is the one area where I think you can just have green veggies. By all means, swap this to a different starch if you want. For instance, if you wanted to look at something like basmati rice, you could do that. And something like, boiled potato gives you quite a similar amount. I would add greens to that. You can, if you want, split it, and just to show you, put something like mixed vegetables in there, but you can see the carbohydrate in it is so low, it's almost not being redundant. What I'm trying to stress here is green veggies are free foods in my book, but that gives you a completely different meal. Now, if you personally want to save this and you like that look, you can save that by pressing this button here, and you can also print it here. So it will not keep track of the only way to keep track of it is to save each day. And this is asking me to save, so I'll save for the argument. And you'll notice if we go back that those, sorry, it didn't save. The only way to keep track is to actually continually save those, but I would actually encourage you to keep a food journal in addition. Now, I can look at the non-training day. You'll see the variation there is largely in slightly lower carbohydrate, and usually I will do something like that to go with it. This is something I haven't set up, but you can see that they're quite. What's important is that proteins and the macronutrients, fats and carbohydrates are set there ready for you to make an adjustment. I hope this helps. If you have any further questions, by all means, shoot me an email and I will talk soon and look forward to your success.